We actually circulate about 2,500 issues, not 1,000. So, but I mean, I think the most public thing. I mean, architecture is a public thing, right? A building is about the most public thing you can do. So, I mean, if you want to engage the world, you build a building, right? And I think it's yeah, I mean, but and certainly.
Yeah, they don't need us. Actually, in fact, that's right. I mean, see, this is what I'm getting at in a way. Is that in fact, you would imagine that kind of directness would be the highest thing. But those buildings wouldn't exist if not for groups like this.
No, absolutely, and I think it's even if praxis is, you know, and all of us here have this. Well, maybe Geoff, you have a much larger audience than the other three of us. But I mean, still, I think although what we do stays within the discipline, I think it moves forward, talking into the discipline.
I think my response to Reinhold's question, I think that audience is actually an extremely important thing. I guess I'd say on one level, I mean, it's the most basic business sense imaginable that if you're an architect and you want someone to hire your services in the future, that you should develop a vocabulary and even a self-presentation that gets someone from the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina to want to hire you to build a house for them, or that sort of thing. If you only tailor yourself even on the level of rhetoric or vocabulary for the 16 other people that read Emile Durkheim last year, then it doesn't necessarily surprise me that architects think that they're sort of ghettoized into a corner where no one can talk to them. So I think that on one level, audience and realizing that there are in fact millions and millions of people that want to talk about architecture and want to talk about the built environment. And sure, they might be watching HD TV and having their bathrooms redone and et cetera, but nonetheless, those are architectural concerns. And if you can get those people talking about architecture in a more interesting way, then that to me is a huge victory and a huge way of broadening out the conversation. So it seems like we've done basic business sense for architecture to want to learn how to talk to a wider audience. But then also just something that I think is quite important is that it's not just the way that architects or the architecture writers talk to the public. I also think it's asking the public more about architecture. I mean, a couple examples that I'll just try to do quickly. There was a film that a German filmmaker put out, Eva Weber, which is basically like a short documentary about crane operators in London. So it's the men that sit up inside of construction cranes and look out over the city. It's only about a half an hour long, but it's a really kind of revelatory look at people that you wouldn't normally go to. I mean, normally you would say, hey, let's talk about construction sites and cranes, and let's get 6 architects. Like, let's ask Frank Gehry what he thinks about construction cranes, which I think is utterly irrelevant. And there's absolutely no reason to assume that our architect is going to have a point of view that is going to apply to all of these sorts of things. But why not ask the actual crane operator, or say, like the traffic police who are in control of certain intersections during things like the Thanksgiving parade, and find out, hey, what are the intersections that you are particularly scared of being at, or that are particularly chaotic at a certain time of day, and why? It's because this office building gets out at that time, or this parking lot empties, and the only reason they know that is because they're working on the street and they're actually doing it. But are there traffic wardens speaking at this conference? I don't think there are. And so it seems that there's 2 ways to do it, I would say, which is one, recognizing that other people do want to talk about architecture, and so you don't need to cite Deleuze, and you don't need to obsessively bring back a certain citational policing, and you can talk about whatever you want to talk about, whether it's, I mean, for that matter, Deleuze or Ghostbusters. You can open up the architectural conversation. But you can also ask these questions to people that aren't normally at conferences like this, and you can talk to chiefs of police, you can talk to people in the fire department, you can talk to people that work crossing guards for elementary schools on the Lower East Side, and find out the streetscapes that affect them, and stop asking architects what they think of streetscapes. And I think that that's actually a really quite important way to broaden out architecture.
Can you tell us, in fact, what you know about who reads your blog and what kind of people, and is there a way to track that?
I mean, you can do surveys and stuff to find out who reads the blog. So and I haven't done that, but I just say from the comments that it gets and from the emails that I get and from the people that I meet when I do talks and whatnot, it's everybody from people that really enjoy playing video games and like building blog to people that just read a lot of fiction to people that like film. I write about music and urban acoustics and so on. So, but I do tend to find that, in all honesty, that whenever it's a majoritatively non-architectural audience who reads the blog, which I actually think is a good thing. I mean, I know that in some ways that must mean that I'm the dunderheaded moron who can't cite Deleuze, but I think that it's actually quite exciting to be able to bring these things to a different audience. Whether or not that's good, better is another issue, but I think it's exciting.
Do you know the numbers of readers?